When the Taliban retook Kabul in 2021, after the withdrawal of American occupying forces, it came as a shock to much of the West. Not only had 20 years of the war on terror failed to defeat the Taliban, they had returned seemingly stronger and in control of more territory than they were before 9/11. But who are these men? What is their attitude towards governing the rights of Afghan women and the nations on their borders? With me to discuss all this and more is Ibrahim Nash'at, a filmmaker and journalist who was able to gain unprecedented access to the Taliban in 2021. His extraordinary documentary, Hollywood Gate, documents the first year following the fall of Kabul. It truly is an amazing film, not least because of the central tension between what the Taliban want to show and the film Ibrahim wants to make. Ibrahim Nash'at, welcome to Downstream.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Why the hell did you go to Kabul literally the day after the Americans withdrew? Like, what possessed you? Didn't you have friends, family, loved ones being like, what are you doing? This is crazy.
It's nice to have the question being asked in a different way than what I normally get, which makes it very serious. So, nope, they were all like, what are you doing? It didn't ring a bell with everybody around me was not agreeing with that. Actually, my friends sat me down just before I went, when I was like transiting, and they sat me down and they said, hey, are you going crazy? Is there something wrong with you? Is there anything we can do to help you not to do what you want to do? And I said, I don't think there's anything wrong. I think I'm doing it right. But they were not convinced. And they stayed not convinced for a very, very long time until we made like a short clip, which was like around 35 minutes after a couple of trips that I showed it to them, where they were like, okay, looks like you're after something. You're not just going crazy. But what was going on inside me is that, you know, the fact that I grew up in the Middle East, and I worked a lot in journalism, and during my work I covered a lot of war zones, either by being there myself or just receiving the material and having to work on it. And the devastation of war has done something to me from a very, very young age. And when I saw the images of Kabul, I directly realized that there has something to be done. And knowing my background, I grew up in a very conservative society, in a very religious family. My upbringing has allowed me to deal with a lot of people who use religion, not people who are just religious, but there are a lot of them that are using religion within this conservative society that is mainly people who just want to be nicer and want to be better, but you get those who are using them for their own benefit. So I was able to deal with that from a very young age. And I felt like I can just deal with the Taliban because they are using the same philosophy somehow. And the world was falling back then for this mentality of, look at them, they are Taliban 2.0. They did this press conference when they are letting women be free, and all of this was making me really angry. But the images of those who were clinging to the airplane and they fell from it and from the airport. You remember there was this image of those who were trying to cling to the wheel of the airplane and they fell from the air, trying to flee the country. And that didn't leave me in peace, because I could see myself, maybe if at this moment, if it was my only hope, I would have done that. So I wanted to go and understand the fear in the eyes of the people and show the world that, no, this is not the Taliban 2.0. And you've spent 20 years in the country thinking that you're making it a better place, but actually you just brought the Taliban back stronger than they were ever. And you never had a full control of Afghanistan. Now they have full control of Afghanistan. So I wanted to bring something out at time of knowing that news will start to withdraw from the country, because I worked in news, and I wanted to be present when I know that no one else would really care. And this is kind of the situation at the moment. Nobody really talks about Afghanistan. It's an off topic, like Afghanistan, really?
I mean, how did you gain access to the Taliban in the first place? You know, can you walk me through that process from first making contact and suggesting the idea of a film all the way to the negotiations about what you could film, where you could be, you know, who you could talk to?
I think since this is a quite long conversation, I could talk a bit more with a bit more details, but people think it's a negotiation, you know? It wasn't a negotiation. It was the Taliban just coming in power, very happy, euphoric, thinking that they are all over the world. They think that they have beaten the strongest power in the world. They have just beaten the NATO and the US. They are full of testosterone, full of euphoria, thinking that they are on top of the world, and they want someone to document that. They were thinking of themselves as war heroes. And that's when I came, and at that time there were a lot of positive reviews that came about them from international media saying that the Taliban are much better now. These are the 2.0 Taliban, as I mentioned earlier. So when I came at that time, they were quite open to receiving media. The first couple of months, any journalist that went there pretty much got an access. And I went with my credentials as a journalist. But once I got there, when I started to talk to them and they said, okay, we can give you an access, but which channel are you working for? I said, I'm not working for any channel. I'm an independent documentary filmmaker. And it's like, yeah, but we don't give independent permissions. Why do you want to do that? I said, I want to spend here 1 year documenting whatever I'm going to see. And I'm not interested in filming anything except making the world know who you are. Whatever that's good, whatever that's bad, I'm going to show in the movie. And for them, this was kind of, okay, this guy is just going to show what he sees as he claims. Then let's just make sure that we show him only the things that is going to be satisfying to us. And if you're really happy with yourself, thinking that you are on top of the world, you think that you make no mistakes. So as long as I'm only filming within the space that they have given me, everything is fine. And I never tried to breach the contract, the kind of this verbal contract. I understand that, especially that I come from the region, our words mean a lot. If I tell you, okay, I'm gonna follow that, that's like a contract. It's here I live in Germany now. Nobody does it in verbal, but in there, it's all verbal. Okay, if we're gonna let you film, you're allowed into these military spaces and film. But you know that with that comes a lot of restrictions. If I try to do anything, I'm putting my life at danger. And I could directly understand that they are very skeptical about my presence. So I had to respect all the rules that either if they said to me or that I understand from the culture. And that's went through. And by the time they started to not want my presence, they wanted me to just leave the country. But I already was inside, and once you're inside, you start to meet a lot of people, and it's a system of favoritism. So one says to the other, okay, shall we let him here for a couple of days? There's this scene in the movie where they bring back the pilots that worked for the previous government, and they say, do you vouch for him? They're like, no, I'm not vouching for him. Do you vouch for them? No, I'm not vouching. Do you vouch? Like until one of them said, us being here is vouching. Mm-hmm. So that's the way it works. It's still, if someone is vouching for someone, and that's how it kept going, that every other day when they tell me, okay, your permission is over, I would talk to many of them from inside until one of them says, okay, I'll talk for you. And when someone talks for someone, they always say, okay, if you want him here, then he can be here.
I want to talk about that scene with the vouching a little bit later, but I guess just to sort of go back to the beginning of the film, which is, you know, the central setting is Hollywood Gate, an airbase that had been vacated by American forces. And when we first see Taliban fighters, they're going through a refrigerator, which is still filled with booze, and they're kind of like laughing and shaking their head. I mean, obviously that's a kind of, you know, in some way that's like a silly thing. And then, you know, the other stuff they find in terms of weapons, equipment, planes, helicopters, they say, you know, the Americans left us treasure. Were they surprised by how far they'd gotten? And were they surprised by the disarray that the Americans had left the base in? You know, were they surprised by what they found?
I think it was surprising on all of the levels to themselves, but it also is extra surprising to me because they were surprised, so I'm falling for how surprised they are. So, and it's just a continuation of surprises because they expected you would find a couple of cars, like there were a lot of cars left behind, which they would directly take and say, this is our ghanima or our war booty that they would split around themselves. In the beginning was very chaotic, and then they started to make a system of, no, there has to be a system of how these cars are being distributed. Not everybody takes whatever they want. And there were a lot of weapons also left behind that were in the beginning in the very first days were quickly taken by everybody. And they called them looters, that they have been looting these things, and they tried to bring them back because individuals from the Taliban were trying to take these things for themselves. But the biggest surprise to them was the fact that actually this base exists, because on papers, according to the reports from the Pentagon, according to any reports by the US, that this base has been completely destroyed and it doesn't exist. For the other bases, they were burned completely down. This one somehow it was not burned down, and we haven't heard anything from the US. Why does this place even exist? And within that space, there are like spare parts. So when they started to discover the airplanes, they were like, oh, but how can we fix these? Some of the guys that were working for fixing that were also working for the Afghan National Army, and now they stayed and they've become the engineers for the new air forces of the Taliban. Told them, Americans had some spare part for these on those places. So they would go, get the spare parts, put them in the airplane, and like, okay, it's being fixed. And even because there were of not understanding, there are a lot of people that were left behind from the previous government, that the Taliban said, we're giving you asylum, but in reality, you have to come back to work. And if you don't come back to work, you're going AWOL. And in any military, anybody that goes AWOL is going to prison. So by law, these men have to either come back to work for the Taliban or just disappear, which is the case of most of them. So the ones who were destroying, some of them remained, and they are now the ones fixing. And this questions the whole plan of leaving in the way it was leaving. And was this part of the plan? Was this never part of the plan? You never understand the surrounds of this, and my job was just to observe. So I'm just observing people who are surprised to find these things, but quickly, this surprise is becoming less of a surprise, more of a system. And it looks from the outside as if it's a system that doesn't know how to calculate 67 times 100, which is true, but from the inside it's functioning because these airplanes are being fixed. And for me, it was the huge surprise that I never expected is going to be fixed.
That was such an extraordinary moment where, so you've got the commander of the Air Force, this like incredibly senior Taliban leader, military leader, and he's asking his men, what's 67 times 100? And everyone's giving wrong answers. When you were sat there and you were observing this moment, what did you think of it? What do you think it demonstrated or reflected?
At the moment when it was happening, nobody understood what's happening, and the translator was not really translating to me because he didn't understand the fact that this is happening. So he was just saying numbers without making me understand what's going on, because he didn't understand what's going on. So we were just filming, I was just at this moment filming faces of people that are pretty much surprised, and I really liked the faces that were going in the room, like the confusion in the faces that you could see. And this is the beauty of observation in cinema, that you could see things, and then when you translate it, the meaning behind it becomes much stronger. So in the edit, when we started editing, we saw this, but I understand there were a lot of moments that similar to this moment. Just the 67 times 100 is the strongest scene of the things that I filmed, which were similar to this chaotic, not understanding the basics of bureaucracy. So it was something that is very meaningful to me, but also it was telling something beyond that. It says something about the difference between simplicity and sophistication, as we have been somehow down-looking at the Taliban, down-looking at the culture of Afghanistan, that these guys, if they are extremely simple, they cannot calculate 67 times 100, they are never going to be able to fix anything. And me, myself, when I was there, I was somehow affected by this mentality. So I never took them serious. When they say we're fixed the Black Hawks, and he says now focus on the 35 bomber jets, I'm just laughing in my heart. I'm completely laughing because like, what are you talking about? What Black Hawks did you fix? And then I saw them flying, and I was like, wait a second, who's the stupid one here? Because I guess I'm the stupid one for deciding that the one in front of me is unaware of how to do things because they were aware. And the world has this mentality of as long as they are not as sophisticated and intelligent the way we seek intelligence, they are just doomed to be, sorry for the word, stupid. But in reality, they have their own ways of intelligence. And for us to reach a step where we could stop the spread of such an extreme ideology, we have to understand the one in front of us, that we could reach the others not to join this extreme ideology and find common educational ground that everybody benefits from, where we could reach peace. But who wants peace?
I mean, in terms of income, education, age, what is the kind of typical Taliban fighter like? Do they come from the country's elite? Do they come from the working class, urban, rural? I mean...
I cannot talk about typical Taliban because I haven't met them all, but I can talk about the ones that I met. And majority of the Talibans that I met are people that come from a very, very poor village, that they had nothing to do with the Taliban. They were not Talibans. Their parents were not Talibans. Maybe their parents were Mujahideen during the previous war, which pretty much most of the villages were involved because there were a lot of tribes being involved, which was also sponsored by the US against Russia to support the Mujahideen. But a lot of them has nothing to do with the Taliban. And then happens the war, and then happens the collateral damage. So one guy dies, or one guy that is a Taliban dies in this war, and then the family wants to take revenge because there's this mentality of revenge or wanting to be back to take over, or envy or hate. Then they start to become Taliban. And this one of the scenes that didn't make it to the movie, but Mukhtar, the younger guy, the lieutenant that we were filming, who is becoming a pilot in the movie, was sitting with his dad, and his dad was telling him about the time when he joined the Taliban. So Mukhtar said to his dad, remember, I was only 13 years old. And his dad said, yes, there were only his dad said, remember, you were only 13 years old. And Mukhtar said, yes, but back then there were only 5% of us in the village that were Taliban. Now there's over 95% that are Taliban, and the rest cannot talk. So this was the mentality of victimization that the Taliban used to bring a lot of people that are very poor. So like somehow they are living in hell. There's war happening at our doorstep. There's nothing to do. So I would rather die and be a martyr than living this life. So they use this mentality of martyrdom, giving hope to people who are living a hopeless life.
Early on in the film, the commander of the Air Force comes out and gives a speech to some soldiers. And many of these soldiers don't have beards. So they're clearly just starting to try and grow their facial hair, which, correct me if I'm wrong, does that mean that they haven't been Taliban for a long time? Because in the Taliban, everyone's got the really thick, well-grown beards.
Yeah. Again, what happened is that when the Taliban took over power, they said, we're giving asylum to everyone. But everybody has to go back to their jobs. Other than this, they will be gone AWOL. So everyone that worked for the previous government or for the Afghan National Air Forces that was trained by the US and didn't leave the country and didn't flee with the US is now forced to work for the Taliban. And every student that was studying in the military school or studying in the Air Force is obligated to come back. So these are soldiers that were already being trained in the previous government, and now they just have to continue doing their training. But they are not doing their training for the Afghan National Army. They are doing it for the Taliban National Army, or the Islamic Emirate Army.
And so these young men, these new recruits, would it be fair to say that they're not ideologically Taliban? does that mean that the Taliban leadership are kind of worried about their loyalty at all?
I think this is the thing that I discovered through the time that I spent in Afghanistan, which was for me the most shocking thing. In my head, I'm thinking Taliban is like the most ideological group of people, that their strongest thing is their ideology. But in reality, the reality on the ground showed me that the leadership is just nationalists, that they want to lead with their nationalism and sense of pride. They want leadership, they want power. And there's this scene in the movie when they force women to wear a face mask. And the younger Taliban is sitting there, and Mukhtar, the younger soldier that were filmed, and he says, I hope that the new law does not contradict with the Sharia law of forcing women to wear a face mask on TV, because he has no idea what Sharia law is. And that's what you get. Majority of the people are not really ideologically aligned in any way or another, but they are aligned in one thing. Whenever we tell you do, you do. Mukhtar once told me, that's a younger guy, which was off camera. I said, if our leader says to me, go to fire, jump in the fire, I will just jump in the fire. So this is the mentality of soldiers in the Taliban, of listen and obey. And that's what they want from everyone. So if you want to pray, you don't pray, or whatever. If you come as soldiers in this, if we give you the order, you follow the order. And it's kind of the mentality of any military state. And that's what they care about, is expanding the army and becoming more of a military state.
But towards the end of the film, you've got this moment where discipline breaks down. So too many Taliban fighters want to go on the first flight of one of these repaired airplanes, and there's almost a mini riot. Did that shock you, or was it in line with your expectations? Because before that, you see them as a very, very disciplined, very coordinated group of fighters. And here, someone's throwing a pipe, everyone's running around, and it seems completely chaotic.
Because there is, for me, it's very normal, because this I was seeing in one giving permission, one taking out their permission, when the way we're dealing with each other on a daily basis. You could see that. You could see the dispute among each other. And I told you again, what gathers them is not really the ideology as much as the fire that they have put in those people. As per my analysis from the people that I spent my time with, maybe others were different, but I'm just talking about the ones that I lived with for the duration of 7 months over the course of 1 year. And you get to see that what gathers them is this need for existence, basically, approval. So it's normal that they have disputes among themselves. Again, I would come back to the moment when they forced this new law on women, and there's a Talib that's sitting there and says, but I don't like it like this. When they say a woman has to wear a face mask on TV, is like, I don't like it like this. And it's like, but this is how Kabul should be. It's like, no, I don't agree with that. And he's like, okay. He's recording, so I cannot say anything. And you could see between each other, I was like, no, we don't want that to happen. And you can even see that today on the bigger topics, because, like, for example, in Kandahar and Dakhar and this area today, they have banned fully the appearance of even Talibans on TV, because that's like the most ideologically stuck part of Taliban, which is the leadership, is they have banned on TV that you cannot see anything except buildings. So you get like this interview, like and the Minister of Health went today to visit this hospital, and he spoke to people, and you get like a radio report, but all what you get is a picture from the hospital, like an image, live image of the hospital from outside at a time when no one is walking in the street. Like not even moving objects in it, because they have decided that the images, any images is forbidden to take. So you get that in there, but in Kabul they are refusing to apply that, because they're like, no, but we don't want that. And they are even trying to convince them, but our presence, and these are the ones that understand propaganda, is like our presence on social media is very important. Our presence on media is very important, and we're gaining a lot of support. Many people are supporting us, falling for our propaganda when we use these tools. It's a tool of war. It's like weapon. So we have to allow us to use it. And I'm telling you that in something that is actually like they are having the fight when something that they understand is beneficial to them. But there are other things that it's not beneficial to them, but you got to accept the dispute. So there's definitely a huge difference in the ideology and understanding between them, and that opens the chance of finding some people that you could talk to and basically establish a conversation, which we don't see happening, because among themselves they don't agree on everything. Of course they don't. And that is not saying let's legitimize the Taliban, because when you legitimize the whole system. No, we're not saying that, but we're saying there are individuals within that system that think differently, that are even in Kabul, after applying, like in Kandahar, you don't get to have even men appearing on TV, but in Kabul they are letting a channel like what is it called, like Tolu News have the entertainment program with women presenters. They are putting the face mask for sure, but there are still women even appearing on it. So it shows the difference in the thinking between the two sides, which is like the big thing. And then within Kabul, you will find the difference. It's humans. Humans always have dispute. And this is something we really focus on in the film, that there is a huge difference between humanizing, because once you humanize someone, you understand that they are not aliens, they don't bite. That means they have weaknesses, because human is a weak creature. We have weaknesses, we have disputes, we disagree with each other. That's humanizing. And there is a huge difference between humanizing, which understanding that we're all weak, and sympathizing, when we understand, oh, we like those guys. And that's what we try to do in the movie, make you understand them without wanting to support them. But you understand them so we can find a way of moving forward somehow.
You talked about this new generation of Taliban understanding the importance of propaganda, so using social media for propaganda. And I remember it very well when Kabul fell. One of the first images of the Taliban that I saw were fighters on, like a pedal boat. And I was seeing these kind of absurd images, which were quite confusing, right? Really confusing to match up the images I was seeing versus what I knew about them. Did you feel that they were trying to use you for propaganda? And was there a tension between what they wanted the film to say and what you wanted the film to say?
That of course was the case. They only allowed me because they hoped, like in general, they hoped that the movie would end up showing something positive about them, and they tried to make sure that what I'm filming is within the limits. So that means we're fine, because they don't see the drawbacks of themselves. They see themselves as amazing human beings. You get to understand directly from the beginning that they are playing a power game. And the power game requires that they want to use this film hoping that it will provide the propaganda they want. And that's why they have given me this limited space to film within, which is filming only with them, because they see themselves as extremely powerful and extremely strong, and their ideology is just perfect, and they don't see any drawbacks about their system. So for them, if I just show the word this, then that's gonna be amazing. So they thought that the movie is gonna be positive only for them. And on the other side, there were many of them that were hoping that by the time when I spend a lot of time with them, I would actually start to like them. I would actually start to buy into their system, start to become one of them. And then that didn't happen. And that's what was causing the dispute. Because one says, let him stay with you a little bit more, he will become one of us. And even if he doesn't say it to me directly, but you could feel that his energy is saying, maybe this guy becomes one of us. And then I don't become one of them. So by the time, like, why are we letting him here if he's not just surrendering to us? So this was creating the dispute with a lot of the people around that were kind of, when I was introduced to them, they have convinced themselves directly that this guy is going to be one of us by the time, but this didn't happen. So that already started to make them feel distant from me. But the biggest thing is that they were still convinced that everything is going to be fine because I'm just filming with them. So they wouldn't realize that wasting medicine and saving weapons is something as horrible as anything else could be. They wouldn't really pay attention to the fact that the regime that they are building is a regime that cares only about weapons and don't care about people. That it's a regime that that the leadership is hitting his own soldiers for doing a stupid mistake, and he's slapping them on the face. And if you do this to your own guys, what would you do to the other people that are against you? And the biggest thing in the movie is that the movie actually exposes that the Taliban is not what they claim to be, is that we only care about Afghanistan and we're never having a plan to expand. We're different than ISIS. ISIS is the one that wants to expand. We only want Afghanistan because they would love to expand. They see themselves as the leaders of the whole Muslim world. They see their own Amir as the Amir of me, an Egyptian. So I should just surrender to the Amir. I'm not really a true Muslim because I haven't surrendered to the Amir, which is their supreme leader. And this was their idea behind that.
So talking about, I guess, their geopolitical ambitions, they were talking a lot about Tajikistan. So one, because the Afghan army of the previous government, some people left and they took equipment and they took aircraft across the border to Tajikistan. And secondly, there seems to be a territorial dispute, or at least territorial ambitions on behalf of the Taliban. They want to take a particular province, I think he mentioned. The fact that the Americans left behind so much equipment, do you think that it increases the likelihood of them launching a military operation in Tajikistan? Or are they saying that on camera to you because they want to do some saber rattling and appear tough?
No, they weren't saying that on camera to me, because I don't think they even realized that I was recording at that moment. That moment was completely recorded when he was stuck in the phone, and I don't think he realized that this was being recorded. And if he did realize that this was being recorded, so it's not something they are just saying on the camera, and there's an investigation we're doing at the moment that actually proves that there are plans at least plans that are being made. Not sure when it's going to be applicable to come out, and these plans are even being made with the Russians. They're not just like Taliban among themselves. No, they are talking to Russia about, we want our stolen military equipment. We want to go into Tajikistan and stop those who are going against us. And historically, Badakhshan was one country in the past. There was like an empire of Badakhshan, which was split into two halves, half in Tajikistan and half in Afghanistan. And Maulay Mansour, our main character, comes from Badakhshan. And in his mind, the whole Badakhshan belongs to him because he's the mayor of Badakhshan. So in his mind, I'm the mayor of not just Badakhshan of Afghanistan. I'm the mayor of the whole empire of Tajikistan. So there is this ethnic background to it that he's mixing with the religious cover that would make people fight and kill themselves for his own hopes to be the leader of the whole Badakhshan, basically.
I mean, Malawi Mansour, who is the commander of the Air Force, he struck me as a very violent man, and a violent man who doesn't have to raise his voice, a violent man who speaks calmly, a violent man who smiles a lot, and that's how you know he's really scary. I mean, did you ever feel afraid for your safety at any points of making this film? And do you think that he has cultivated a menacing persona, or is that really him?
How old do you think he is during the time of filming?
So hard to say, because he's obviously had a rough life. So I would guess 40s, maybe?
He's 38 years old. Oof. Extremely young for such a big persona and huge personality. Of course, I was always scared, especially around him. I was always... I know he's been through a lot of wars, and his dad was killed in war. He's traumatized, definitely. He's suffering from PTSD, and that makes him an impulsive human being. So at any second, he could just flip on me. And I was under his mercy and his guys. He's walking around with 40 guys that at any second he was just like, if he says, take him, disappear him, I'm gone. Nobody knows anything about me after that. So of course this thought was in the back of my mind, but also I knew that I had to keep going because there is no half job could be done. I cannot be half job Harry in this. Have to to go all the way through. Especially that people were seeing me in the street as a Taliban. And this was haunting me and not making me able to sleep. Every time I would come back to Berlin in between for breaks, I would remember the looks of the people towards me, that I am a Taliban. And I don't understand how the Taliban see the people, look at them this way, and they are still feeling powerful. You should really surrender to the people and see the needs of the people if you want to lead the country. But they're like, oh no, we're your leader, you should listen and be who they are. And the looks were given to me was really stuck in my head, and I was telling myself, I made a promise to myself not to do like the NATO and the US, that once you discover that the things are not walking towards what you wanted, you just leave and betray the people who trusted you. Because some Afghans, they really trusted and believed in what the West was claiming to do for Afghanistan, which didn't really happen at the end. So I didn't want to be another one that comes from outside, uses the people of Afghanistan to make something that is personal and strong, and then just leaves. I wanted to make something about the Afghans. And it shows the pain of the Afghans, and it just doesn't show my journey, make the easy one, which making myself the hero, the story of this brave guy who went into Afghanistan and came out with safe, and which can be done way faster than 1 year. That story is much faster to do, and I promised myself that this is never going to be the story I'm making, and if the movie does not convey the pain of the Afghans, it's not going to work. And that required a lot of patience to actually, while shooting, to know that the futility of my materials is not very strong, and there is a way of showing the pain of the Afghans even if we don't see them. And it was during even the whole editing process that I was haunted with this futility of the material, that maybe I'm not still able to show the pain of the Afghans. So it had to have a lot of patience while we were shooting, and also in the edit with the whole incredible editing team and producers that I was working with. And they were always assuring me, hey, Ibrahim, relax. And they are like people that are beyond their cinematic ability were beyond mine. So I didn't see what they are capable of. And they were like, hey, relax, we can figure out a way to make this happen, and the cinema tools could allow us to this. And they just made me understand the way and how can we go there, until the last day of editing, when you could actually watch the film and you could feel for the pain of the Afghans, and you don't think, oh, this is the hero who was making the story, because it's very easy to do that.
I mean, with a man like Maulawi Mansour, how did you manage the relationship with him? Because you said at any moment he could turn on you. Your life would be in danger if he turned on you. Did you manage it by being friendly? Did you manage it by being unobtrusive? Did you manage it by meeting strength with strength? How do you interact with a man like that?
You know, there was once while we were shooting that I said to him, how old are you? And he said 38, and I said, oh, only 38? He looked at me like this. Oof. Are you going to try to befriend me or what? So this was the kind of relationship that we had. He's the boss that is walking around with 40 soldiers, and I'm just an additional guy who's walking around, and he's being let in his own space. I did not try to cross these boundaries. I accepted all of the boundaries. I accepted the distance. I never tried to sit and interview him or step on any of his toes. I'm just like allowed to be into that space, and I'm very thankful I was able to do it, to God, of course, not to him, that I was allowed to be in that space, which required me to be silent, agree on anything. So if he, for example, says, like in the movie, he says, don't show what's behind this wall to the filmmaker, I never tried to look even without the camera, so he doesn't get pissed. So whatever rules that they are saying, he said, I don't want to see you for another month, I wouldn't call him for another month. I don't want to see you for a week, I wouldn't call him. He said, leave now, I would leave now. I wouldn't try to argue or do anything. I'm just mute, basically.
He said at one point, I married a doctor, but I gave her a condition, I'll only marry you if you stop practicing medicine. One, how did it feel hearing that and getting a glimpse of his personal life? And two, how much does that reflect the experience of Afghan women? Did they get some more freedom for 20 years and it got taken away? Or was that only for a few women, and for most women who are poor or live in rural areas, it made no difference either way, that their lives didn't change, their freedoms didn't change.
I think you could directly see from the scene something very interesting, is that although they force women not to be educated, when he chose to marry someone, he decided to marry the educated one. He did not pick the not educated one. He picked the one that is educated, that could be smart enough to have a conversation or raise his kids. And it's a very big question. Why would you pick the educated one and not one of the non-educated women that you forced them not to be educated? And why would you pick the smart one? And why are you not allowing women then to be all educated so they can be better mothers for your kids? It's all big questions that come towards my head. But the past of Afghanistan for women was way stronger before all of these wars, before the presence of the Soviets and the Americans and the first era of the Taliban and the civil war. Afghan women were having a great life and they were doing everything, and they were much stronger than any time. They were way more advanced than many of the surrounding countries. So I don't think we can really think of the fact that the presence of the West for those 20 years was giving women their freedom, because what kind of freedom you give a woman that once she passes 20 years old, you bring her back to the Taliban? And did you really change the country by forcing war in the country? Because today you've left the Taliban in power, women are back to where they were, all of the jobs that they were having were taken away from them. So was it really for the people, or for also, again, the propaganda that was making the world look like it's something just to do?
Does it feel upsetting when you're talking about the situation for Afghan women and the Afghan people who've been stuck with the Taliban regime?
It's feel upsetting when you talk about the situation of Afghanistan, because it's a country that didn't have a break of the wars. They had the Taliban now for 3 years. Before that, 20 years of war that many people were killed as casualties. And before that, there was the Taliban again, less powerful than the Taliban today. And before that, there was the civil war. And before that, there was the Soviet Union and the involvement of the West by buying weapons for the Mujahideen, making them the Mujahideen who they were, bringing Arabs to fight with them. So the history of the Afghans for the last 45, 46 years has just been unrested, and women and men have been suffering, and they haven't had a break. And if it's one of the countries that is one of the most beautiful cultures you could see, music of Afghanistan, and the poetry is brilliant. They are one of the foundations of the Persian Empire, which is one of the most poetic, most beautiful, most artistic empires that was there. And when you look at the situation now, it just is very sad.
When you're making a film about a country like Afghanistan, but you're being told you can't talk to the civilians, you can't film the civilians the way you're filming the Taliban leadership, what strategies did you have to try and show the condition of the people, even if it could only be in these glimpses?
To be honest, I was extremely afraid while I was shooting, and as I told you earlier, I was haunted by the futility of this of the material that I was shooting, because I couldn't show the suffering of the people. So I cannot claim a strategy. I was just shooting and hoping that something will come together, and it's something we discovered in the editor, that we could use the character of the cameraman to make the people feel the fear for him, and then take all of that from his hands and put it on the people. So you feel for the cameraman that he's being suppressed by the Taliban, and by the end you realize, wait a second, this is just a guy with a camera, but the people there are way more suppressed than this guy. So you actually leave the film feeling for the people, and this was a strategy we discovered during the edit, that we could do it this way, that we could use cameraman, or me, as we call it, the cameraman. So this was the language we were using in the edit to call my character the cameraman, so I don't get any offensive. We can just call him names and it's fine. So the character of the cameraman, which is my character in the movie, was just being used as a tool to bring the suffering of the people to the front. And it worked. Before that, I was always trying to find a way within the material that we shot with the team. How can we do that? And the team was really incredible in creating that, led by the producers Talat Derki and Shane Boris, who co-wrote the film with me, and also the other producer, Odessa Ray, who did with Shane Navalny, and Talat did of Fathers and Sons, which are all incredible movies. And also it was supported by Atanas Georgiev, who's one of the best editors in the world for documentaries, who's done Honeyland. I don't know if you've seen it. A brilliant film. And also Marion Tour, who worked on Housemaid of Splinter as the second editor. So this team was just an incredible team that were capable of working together with me. And also we were supported by Sahra Karimi, the head of the Afghan National Film Organization, which was closed down by the Taliban. So there was this team that we were able to go through the material and say, okay, but if we put this next to this, maybe it would feel like that. And they were able to make it work.
We talked about the scene where the former pilots have come back and the commander is saying, do you vouch for him? Do you vouch for him? And that was a moment where the fear felt very palpable. And you could see that there were some individuals who came in trying to be friendly, but then the smile kind of died from their face. And there were these long silences where the commander would just sort of let his question hang there. And the fear, for me anyway, felt very powerful. What was it like being in the room and observing it? Because obviously you don't understand the language being spoken, but you can see the faces, you can read the body language. What was that like?
When I was shooting it, when they were all standing in front of the flag, I didn't understand what was going on. The translator was having a little break, or the interpreter, Adel. So he came in the middle when it was happening. It's like, you should film that. That's very important. Like in the beginning, he wasn't really paying attention. We were sitting in the office for so long that day, like 6 hours before that, and nothing really was happening. And this is also, again, observational cinema, that you think that I went in and I took the scene and I left. I was there for 6 hours trying to film anything from his office work, but nothing really was happening. And then they came, and when the scene started, he started in the middle and says, hey, you should film that. But I was already filming it because they were all standing in front of the flag. The way when they want to put people to death, they would make the same scene, put them in front of the flag, and the faces were looking like that to me. So that's how I felt at that moment, is that these are people who are standing here to have their life taken. And in reality, it was people who did not flee the country when the US left, because for different reasons, their family, they wanted to stay at home. Not everybody wants to leave their country, you know? Many people of Afghanistan wish to just be in Afghanistan, wish to be in Kabul, and wish that this war didn't happen in the first place, wish that the Taliban did not become as strong as they are, so there is a chance of getting rid of them. So you see them standing there, and they have no source of income. They are forced to go back to the work, because if they don't go back to their work, they will be called AWOL and they will go to prison. And now they have to work with the people they were fighting. So think about the dynamics of that I've killed maybe your cousin, I've killed your dad, I've killed your brother, and now we have to work together. And who has the upper hand is the one that could at any second flip on you. So it's a very, very bizarre situation, but it goes back again to the question of, these were made two armies against each other. They were not as two armies against each other. And the strongest sentence that the guy said in that scene for me was the guy who was asking him, would you vouch for them? And he said, no, I don't vouch for them. And he said, if there is any resistance or a trial of coup, some of you might, and he's like threatening him. And he responds by saying, I hope that we don't have to pick sides again. At this moment, he just wishes I don't have to pick sides. I hope that I don't need to pick sides and fight my cousin and fight my neighbor, because at the end, they are all Afghans. So it's very, very painful, and this scene is the most painful scene for me in the whole movie, because it stayed with me for so long, trying to analyze in my head what I'm living through and what these guys are going through, and it's very hard. And today, people who are fighting the Taliban are considering these guys part of the Taliban's army. They don't agree with their mentality, and they don't agree with any of that, but now they are considered as part of the Taliban's army.
So I suppose my final question is this. This is a film which is being seen by Western audiences in the UK, maybe audiences in America, other NATO countries, the countries which were involved in the invasion of Afghanistan in 2001. What lesson do you want Western audiences to take from this film?
I hope that they understand that the forever war mentality was a complete failure, and that you cannot fight an ideology with a weapon. You cannot just take a weapon and kill an ideology, because every day you kill anything of the ideology, it plays the role of being a victim, and it becomes stronger. If it's not stronger today, as it seems to be, you've weakened it, it's stronger in 20 years. Which is the outcome of this war. 20 years ago, the US thought that they are done, the Taliban are done, they have ended Al-Qaeda. And look at Afghanistan today after 20 years. They are strong, the Taliban are stronger than they ever were. And I hope that we understand that war begets war begets war. So we need to figure out different ways of having the world a better place than killing people and causing a lot of collateral damage. And I hope that also there is an understanding that the Taliban understand what the propaganda is today. Taliban of today are different than the Taliban in the past. Kandahar is trying to push the Taliban in the past mentality on the Taliban of Kabul, but Kabul is still refusing that because they understand the power of propaganda. And they did not only inherit from the US the weapons that were left behind that they were able to fix, but they inherited mostly the propaganda tools that were applied against them by Hollywood, considering them as the evil that don't eat, don't drink, don't sleep. They just kill and want to kill, and that's what they are promoting in their own country that's what they are promoting for Afghans today, to bring more people towards their ideology that everyone else around the world is an infidel and we're just the saviors. We speak the word of God and we're the ones that are gonna save you. So they find different ways of using religion and using every possible tool of propaganda to control people.
Ibrahim Nash'at, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.